Godfrey Deeny here at Pure London, the great trade fair in the Olympia. About to give a lecture, speech, keynote address on the big trends in fashion so far, from the catwalks, from haute couture in Paris to Pitti menswear salon in Florence, to pret-a-porter in Paris, to London Fashion Week and to Milano Mode. Godfrey Deeny here for fashionnetwork.com at Pure in London.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us here on the main stage. I would like to introduce to you our next speaker, the international fashion critic, Godfrey Deeny.
Hello everybody, my name's Godfrey Deeny. I'm a fashion editor. We're going to be talking today about the runway seasons of 2019 and what we've seen and what sustainability, which we see everywhere in fashion, inclusivity, incredibly mixed catwalks in terms of gender and race and religion, and a return to avant-garde sensitivity, eccentricity, allied, as we're in London, to an element of discussion about Brexit. I know you must all be very bored with that, but it's played a role in fashion in the last 6 months. Chronologically, the fashion season begins every year in women's fashion in Paris with the haute couture season. That happens at the end of January. There's probably only 3,000 or 4,000 women who actually buy these clothes, but nonetheless the ideas are influential. And once again, some of the things we saw were a kind of return to strict tailoring, a certain idea of classiness, and once again, very avant-garde eccentricity, which we see in Jean-Paul Gaultier. And we also saw, this was a year obviously marked by the death of Karl Lagerfeld, the single most famous designer in the world. His most important job was at Chanel. He had actually 3 jobs for the last 30 years, running his own business, running Chanel in Paris, and running Fendi. This was the last show that he completely designed. He also had some looks later on the year of couture, and that particular day, that's when the announcement was made that he would not be taking a bow at Chanel, and you realize that his days sadly would be numbered. That was the 22nd of January, and on the 19th of February he had passed away. The women's ready-to-wear season it's a bit like, fashion's a little bit like golf or tennis. There's the big 4 Grand Slam tournaments, and we've just seen the golf one ended, but in fashion, chronologically, it's always New York, London, Milan, Paris. I didn't go to New York this season because my wife was having our second boy, so I stayed at home in Paris. So the first season I went to this year was to London. And once again, what we saw was a remarkable thing. This is a trailer of the movie The Red Shoes, which influenced Simon Roche. It sort of summed up the romanticism and certain eccentricity of fashion in London. The remarkable thing about the London season is how 2 things have happened in the last 10 years. That with the internet, the young London designers have become very successful commercially. 20 years ago, when I would go and see a show in London, I knew that the designer would be bankrupt within 5 years. Now, with the web, with the ability of social media, these young designers have all developed sustainable businesses, selling in 150, 200, 300 doors, selling on net-a-porter and matches in these businesses. Simon Roche is a classic example of that. Nearly all of them, curiously, even though they're London-based designers, are non-British. Roxanda Ilic is Serbian, Peter Pilotto are a Belgian, Austrian couple, Miri Kitransu is Greek, and all of them will tap into a certain idea of colour and eccentricity that is uniquely British. in its fashion. This particular show was influenced by the Greek philosopher Empedocles, who thought about the ideas of wind and fire, and see those patterns of ideas in the clothes that she shows there. And then finally, the single biggest show in London at the moment is by J.W. Anderson, Jonathan Anderson. Like me, a Northern Irishman, as you can tell from my accent, who also has a nighttime job. He designs for Loewe, the #1 brand in Spain. And once again, it is something about the eccentricity of the thing. I think Jonathan used the term, he said it's about awkward elegance, a little like Britain, which was how he put the idea. After that, there's a day on Tuesday when everyone, all the fashion editors get in the plane and they head to Milan. And in Milan, it really is an industrial powerhouse. It doesn't have as much creativity in London, but it has lots of energy, and nearly everyone produces your clothes in Milan. There's a brand new building in Milan called Bosco Verticale, skyscraper, which is highly sustainable in terms of wind vents, solar energy, and everyone has a garden. It's a rather unusual building. A lot of the shows now take place around that building. Fashion, in a way, if you're an editor, is a brilliant architectural tour of the world, and it kind of summed up the mood in Milan of sustainability, ecology, but people also going back to work. The curious thing is the Milanese, their idea, this is a Prada collection, their idea, when they say goodbye, they say buon lavoro, good work with your work. They're very serious people. This is, I wanted to show you some videos so you can look at actual shows. This is the Prada runway show, featuring most of today's major supermodels. But once again, strikingly inclusive. There was a time 5 years ago where there would be no black models, no models of colors, no Asian models practically in any Prada show. That has all changed now in the last few years, as you can see. Some of the ideas of the collection were about feminism, but feminism very much on Miuccia Prada's terms, with a kind of use of military iconography together with romanticism. One thing I thought was important was there was an idea of business. Of course, nowadays, successful career women don't really wear business suits anymore. They often wear quite dressed up clothes. Like, for instance, these ideas of Armani, where practically every suit was made with job purse or cigarette pants, and at Max Mara, where they had a show which referenced the power shoulders of the 1980s. And once again, it was a show staged in the biggest business school in continental Europe, which is the Bocconi, the kind of Harvard of Italy, where all of the students were allowed in, so it was a new generation of consumers could get to see what hopefully they would one day buy. The most famous lady designer in the world is probably Donatella Versace. It's an example of the energy of fashion that her house was acquired last year for $2 billion, a remarkable figure for a business. And it's an example of how much money there still is in the industry. This show, I thought it was interesting that it captured once again the iconography of the brand, from the safety pin made famous by Liz Hurley here many years ago, and used again as the backdrop of the band, to the Medusa's head, the icon of Gianni Versace, to the Imperial Roman prince, to the sense of drama in what they're doing. A show which sort of relaunched Donatella as a significant designer once again, when there's been a lot of talk that the company that had bought Versace were going to fire her and evict her, but that isn't what happened. Once again, highly inclusive cast from Gigi Hadid, a Palestinian Swedish girl, to also quite a lot of veteran models appearing in the show. as you can see, various ages. And the set, to get an idea of how elaborate the sets are in big shows in Milan or Paris, I think it's quite striking that the kind of quantity of models and money that's spent on it is dramatic, and inevitably, I can't fast forward, but inevitably Donatella takes it. The number one brand in the world at the moment in fashion is Gucci. It's achieved rates of growth of something like 50% a year. It's about to become the biggest brand in the world. It's 8 billion euros in sales last year. And it's very interesting that it's managed to do this with highly eccentric clothes. There's not terribly work-related at all. The kind of classic Gucci girl today is an Italian aristocrat who goes and lives in a walk-up apartment in Brooklyn to work in her novel and dresses out of a thrift shop or wearing her grandmother's clothes. It's a very unusual amalgam of fashion, but it's become the fastest growing luxury brand in the world, and it also references the past in very eccentric ways. It stages shows in Roman temples, it shoots its advertisements in Greek temples, it's highly transgressive, and it's kind of broken the whole rule book about how you make luxury brands successful by changing the paradigm of fashion, as these images indicate. Finally, you come to Paris. First thing that's striking in Paris is that logos are still successful. You always think logos are about to go out of fashion. There have been so many handbags, so many belts, so many caps, but actually it's still a vibrant part of the industry. Most notably in Balenciaga, where Demna Ghelvassi is one of the top 5 shows. Once again, a Georgian immigrant from war who's ended up becoming the designer of, creative director of one of the 5 most famous fashion brands in Paris. Then we're talking about Brexit. It was interesting in the context of that. Christian Dior's latest show was based on teddy girls, a British cultural trend, one of the youth movements of Britain that keep on influencing fashion. Christian Dior, you know, there was a huge exhibition in London on Dior and on the history of the brand. And Dior himself, he dressed Princess Margaret when she was 21 in a famous diaphanous dress. And British fashion influenced him all his years, from hunting to Scottish tweeds to worsted fabrics, to all the way to the current designer, who is the first woman designer at Christian Dior. There have been 8 designers in the history of the brand, and the current designer is Maria Grazia Curie, a Roman lady, an Italian who this year won the Legion d'Honneur for her designs. And it's very interesting that they took this British idea. Was, for instance, everyone talks about the Dior and you look, the famous wide dress, but the other great look of Dior is the bar jacket, which is that slightly curvy, nipped at the waist jacket on the left. It's called a bar jacket because it was designed to be worn when you went to a cocktail bar, so they call it the bar jacket. And it's interesting that the Dior now has taken that and made it into, you know, Clan Stuart tartan and given it this teddy girl look. The most successful French designer today is a guy called Hedi Slimane. Hedi Slimane now does Celine, he did Dior Homme, he did Yves Saint Laurent. And Celine, it's interesting what his references, he's gone back to 1970s Saint-Germain classical French chic. It's instructive that it's funny how the French guy's gone reverted to its roots, whereas the Italian in Paris at Dior has gone to London for inspiration. This is the first collection by Chanel Cruz, done since the departure of Karl Lagerfeld, and it got mixed reviews. It's a cruel world of trying to take over a huge brand. It's a bit like when Karl Lagerfeld died, it was a bit like Sir Alex Ferguson leaving Manchester United, or Margaret Thatcher falling into government, their successor is always going to have a very hard time. And that's slightly what's happening at Chanel. Givenchy, another great French house, once again under the creative control of a foreigner, a British designer, Claire Waite Keller, who emphasizes elegance, but in a British way. Her role model was the people like Honor Fraser, English aristocrats who had a bit of street style. And that was the message she put into her Givenchy collection. One of the big elements we're seeing in fashion, as I said, was inclusivity. And the biggest single show in Paris, a number of people, was Tommy Hilfiger with Zendaya, the actress model of the moment. And it was inspired by a very famous fashion show in Versailles in the 1970s, where 4 or 5 American designers competed against 4 or 5 French designers. The Americans were Halston, Oscar Laurent, Bill Blass, and the French were Dior, Givenchy, and they competed to raise money to restore Versailles, and the Americans won that day. They showed up, one of the reasons, they showed up with lots of black models. They had an incredibly inclusive casting, and that's a photo of the original show, and some of the models in that original show appeared 40 years later in this show, which Tommy Hilfiger did with Zendaya. But what I loved about it was they actually took that idea, brought it forward, and they turned it into a roller disco show, and they had it on the Théâtre de Champs-Élysées, one of the great theatres of Paris. That's where Stravinsky revolutionized orchestral music by doing the Rites of Spring. That's where Picasso did stage sets. And it was interesting to see such an inclusive casting smack in the middle of Paris. Inclusive also in terms of shapes as well, not just, it was interesting out here. And then finally, as he had a live act at the end, came on, and that was Grace Jones, who I think looks pretty good for a woman of 71. The biggest brand in the world is Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton is the #1 luxury brand. It does about 10 billion euros a year. It's the most profitable, and it has 2 designers, and the women's wear designer is a very reputable French designer called Nicolas Casquer, dresses lots of movie stars. I don't get it at all. He does. It's quite clever, technological, fashion, fabrics, and space age. I just don't think people look very good. But it's a remarkable thing that this brand has stayed so incredibly successful despite the designer not getting very good reviews from people like me. Now, menswear. We're going to talk briefly about that. Direction of tailing, quite clearly important. Athleisure, which dominated menswear for about 5 years, has kind of faded away. Sustainability, again, lots of recycled clothing. Anti-nationalism, which appeared in lots of different ways, and gender fluidity, very important trend. The opening shows, once again, are the way that the menswear season is basically in Europe. You begin in London, you go to Pitti in Florence, then you go to Milan and Paris. In London, opening show of the season was completely transgressive. I think these are the first looks. They were men wearing women's clothes, with guys with hairy legs wearing cocktail dresses. That was the opening menswear show in the menswear season. Very interesting that that idea has become so dominant in fashion. And the #1 show now, in top 3 show, is Charles Jeffrey, very clever designer. He's a finalist in the LVMH prize, the biggest prize in fashion for young designers. And he calls his fashion queer couture. It's very clear what his intention is. And then we go to Pitti Uomo. This is a wide project. That was the show of the moment in Florence. It's more, the photos don't reflect it so well, but talk about the volume once again. the key word everyone used in Milan and Italy this season is an Italian word, sprezzatura. It means when you're at ease with yourself and relaxed. And I took that image from the great Roman holiday movie with Gregory Peck. And that's debuted by a UK designer once again, Bottega Veneta. And then finally I wanted to show you for menswear. This is Armani's own, George Armani's own home, his own palazzo on Via Borgo Nuovo, where for once he did a show in the courtyard. And what I liked about it was Armani, even though he's 85 this year, is still coming up with unusual constructions and sartorial ideas. It's not the classic suit at all in terms of volume, proportion, the lightness of the fabrics. And I thought it worked very well. And at the end of it, you will see Armani takes a bow. 12 or so years ago, he used to dress the English national football team. And at the time, Armani often wears a very deconstructed jacket like this. There's no padding in it. And he turned up wearing one in and David Beckham admired it. And Armani said, would you like one? And he got within 48 hours, Beckham had his size delivered to him. It was a prototype Armani was wearing. So when he showed it in the show, he called it the Beckham jacket. So every single show that Armani does, there's nearly always a deconstructed cardigan jacket, Beckham jacket. And at the end of it, you just see Armani. That's a double-breasted Beckham jacket that Jean-Philippe Armani is wearing in his own. Ecology, sustainability, Fendi, the biggest fur brand in the world, where Karl Lagerfeld also designed. That was his third job. It's interesting. The latest show was a kind of Monty Don, Gardener's World show where everyone was completely dressed up like they were going to become a very luxurious gardener in a royal palace of Milan. I thought it was revealing about menswear. Here we go, tailoring, we're talking about that. The strict lines we're seeing at Berluti. We also see volume at Paul Smith, one of the big shows. He always shows men's in Paris, always has. And then, once again, transgressive clothes. The hot new Spanish label, Paloma, was a big show in the Spanish Empire. Once again, it looks as if you're not quite sure what gender fluidity you are. Once again, a compliment to the success of British designers. Dior, fantastic label. Its designer is an English guy, Kim Jones, an Englishman brought up in Africa as a young man, his family moved about, who's ended up becoming perhaps the single biggest menswear designer in Paris. It's another example of how fashion doesn't have any creative borders and why instinctively fashion people will never be in favor of Brexit. This show is interesting to see the suitcases that they're showing. LVMH is such a giant empire. The latest brand they brought was Remova, the famous suitcase, metallic aluminum suitcase, and they've taken these optic fabric and started printing it on Remova, and that was the first show that they showed it in Paris. Now, fashion goes in Europe. The other unusual thing is that all fashion brands take their shows on the road now. Nearly everyone, if you're a top 20 brand, you have to go abroad and stage a show to time with an exhibition or a major store opening in one of the cities. In this case, Dior went to Marrakesh, because it was a collection highly influenced by African pattern patterns, by wax printing from West Africa, with contributions by African origin designer, including a brilliant young British designer, Grace Wales Barr, who won the LVMH prize 3 years ago. She contributed a bar jacket to that particular collection. Armani, he went to Tokyo for a store opening in Ginza, the most expensive real estate in Asia. He did a sort of Japanese Art Deco show, and then finally back to Fendi, who had a show in the Imperial Roman Forum were inside the Temple of Venus, the biggest ancient temple in ancient Rome, and a lot of the collection was influenced by the marble and the stones and the patterns of ancient Rome. to make intarsia furs. Once again, that was the first major show by Fendi after the Porsche. Couture, to come back now, we started in January with couture, then this is couture in June, Armani show in Paris. An ecological thing in terms of colour. I've never seen so much green on the runway of Paris in all my life. In Valentino, even there, those dresses are entirely made of steel. She's the most important avant-garde designer in couture areas for American. It's ecological looking, but all made of metal. It's incredible technical skill. Guopei, the only major Chinese couturier, once again, all based in nature. Dior, their actual show, I was talking about feminism. Once again, this was based on the idea of architectural forms and certain gravitas. Literally, they had the original house of Dior as a design. And then finally, in the kind of standout show of the Paris Couture Week by Valentino, where, as you can see, practically every model is a person of color in one form or other. The whole inclusivity of in fashion has never been so obviously expressed as in any fashion show as this particular one by Valentino. It's a return in fashion generally to kind of hyper feminine statement. On top, finally, exit what I was saying by talking about celebrities, the importance of fashion. Every single fashion show nowadays in Paris alone, it's not successful if a bunch of celebrities. I just showed you briefly the backstage of Valentino. Naomi was there, of course, and now she stars in the ad campaign. The ecological movement, I want to reiterate that. The most interesting designer from an ecological point of view, I think, at the moment, is Oscar Mestavat from Osklin. It's a great Brazilian brand who uses only sustainable fabrics. Most importantly, he actually uses fish skin for all of his sneakers and bags. It's an incredible kind of advanced ecological, and that's him being given the Green Carpet Challenge by Olivia Firth, who has invented an award called the Green Carpet Award, which takes place every year in September in Milan and La Scala. So, to talk about celebrities and began appearing, besides doing the joint collaboration with Tommy Hilfiger, she turned up at Armani on the right, and at Givenchy, another look. Then she came all the way to Rome to the runway show of Fendi. And now, in the next stage, Tommy Hilfiger will bring his collection to the most iconic theatre in Black America, the Apollo Theatre in Harlem, when he does his next show with Denzai in September. There are risks involved in getting big close collaborator. Asap Rocky, great musician, has been very active at coming to Paris fashion shows. He turned up, but as you saw, he was arrested recently, and now Donald Trump is trying to get him out of jail. So I think Dior and brands like that now suddenly feel maybe we've become a little bit too friendly. And finally, that's him with Rihanna. Rihanna is now the latest great musician, but also the celebrity who's involved in fashion. She began turning up at shows. She actually did her own show, Fenty, inside the Bibliothèque Nationale, the greatest library in continental Europe, a giant space. They let her get up and do a runway on the main tables of the thing. It's funny how the French will, if you're an American movie star, they'll let you do an awful lot. Did the show, so much so, she then did a joint venture with the second richest man in the world. His name is Bernard Arnault. He is the owner of LVMH, the biggest luxury conglomerate in the world, who owns Dior, Givenchy, Vuitton. They own a quarter of the Champagne, Dom Perignon, Boeuf Picot. They own Sephora, the chain of beauty stores, which I'm sure you've all been to. And he has done now a joint venture with her. And now they even have promoted their own Fenty line. They did a presentation in Paris. It's amazing how the thing has adapted. The French manager, the establishment are amazingly flexible about talent. And But fashion still has its mistakes. It may be inclusive, but it still gets things badly wrong. And I hate to end on a tough moment, but I think it's important. Both Gucci and Prada, very successful brands, ended up running those, producing blackface materials, which was appalling, and both of them have stopped taking them out of production, thankfully. That's what the mistake that they made. The one good byproduct of that is since then all the major brands have appointed directors of inclusivity to try and make them a bit more sensitive to it. So that's my roundup for today. I hope it made some sense for you all.